No fancy intros, just rant. So I want to rant a little bit about exiled-destiny and just in general DVD ripping groups. These were very prevalent back in the 2000s and once again in the 2020s, which is weird to say. I mean, I guess they'll be always ever present as long as physical media continues and persists, though now it's mostly been taken over by like web rippers and dozens of them at that. But I want to keep it on track here. I want to rant about exiled-destiny. For those that don't know, exiled-destiny was a DVD ripping group that primarily ripped R1 DVDs, Region 1, which would be North America, specifically United States. This group specialized specifically in stuff from like ADV, Geneon, Pioneer, those kind of things from the US at least. And their claim to fame was that they had a quote-unquote high-quality releases and provided dual audio for those who wanted it, which meant that it had English dub and then Japanese audio as well included, which was cool, but they weren't necessarily the first to do so. There was another group around at this time called Kick-Ass Anime, or KAA. You kind of see their stuff around sometimes, but mostly it's like old shit that people don't see it anymore, which is unfortunate. But they were a good group. They mostly did the same. I prefer them over exiled-destiny since Kick-Ass Anime opposed English dubs. In their releases, I'm almost certain they never included the dub. Sometimes they included like a quirky font that their subs were put into, but of course if you're a power user, you can always override that if you don't really like their font choice or whatever. But exiled-destiny, I guess, provided the same service except with the English dubs. So the idealism of KAA was kind of overtaken by exiled-destiny's wide appealing, at least, offerings. I mean, in general, exiled-destiny was pretty good. A little bit earlier, I said like quote-unquote quality, because like at the time, they were good. And there's fireworks in the background. Hopefully you don't hear that. I don't know why the hell there are fireworks right now. Is it like, isn't it like technically tanabata, August 7th or something like that? July 7th and August 7th or something like that. Weird. Anyways, I digress. Back on topic. So back in the day, it was a lot of fan subs and you saw a lot of hard sub releases. exiled-destiny was providing dual audio, fairly well encoded, or at least at the time fairly well encoded DVD rips, which were significantly higher quality than the TV rips, and especially more so than the hard sub AVIs that fan sub groups were putting out. So they became like the de facto, if you want quality, go there. Just in general, DVD rips, but this was the group that was probably the most popular since they were the ones who persisted the longest, and still have yet to die. But they were pretty decent, and usually when you watch older shows, especially from the 2000s, you're gonna run into them. They're probably gonna be the group that, like, if you're watching random ass shows from 2000s and you can't find a fan sub, you're probably gonna find the exiled-destiny release there, simply because it's like the easiest release to point at and say it was the quality release, since they were the ones who ripped the DVD of it. Because oftentimes there will be, especially like in recent years, I'd say within the past maybe 5 years, there's been a resurgence of like release groups, and there have been teams going back in time in giving these releases like the proper release that they deserve, with a well-encoded DVD, the proper subs, and sometimes they even give you the offering of like, you want the retail subs, track 1, you want the fan subs, track 2. So there's some decent stuff out there. But for random ass shows that don't necessarily have a following around them, or like the release groups that are around right now don't give a shit about them, they're not going to have a release. So it's going to be defaulting to exiled-destiny, which I did a lot, because it was around the time like 2017, 2018, I started to watch more anime. I started to run into this group a lot, and for a while there I was actually like into them, because like if you go to their site exiled-destiny.com, or exiled-destiny to be more specific, their site looks pretty cool. It's like old school. It's like they haven't updated it since 2006 or something, so it's pretty base and it's comfy. And like a lot of the releases weren't necessarily that good, but there was something about them that I found very like nostalgic. Like you were watching an old DVD back in the day, like you had the ADV disc 2 and you just slotted it into your computer or something like that. That's kind of what the group gave. And then they also usually included soft subs, and then the it's not PGS, but it's like it was VOB sub, VOB SUB. But here's kind of where my compliments end, because like yes, it was a comfy release, and I was kind of being a weird hipster about it in terms of like actively seeking out their releases. But I guess there are some good things about that, because if you're specifically searching within the exiled-destiny backlog, you're going to run into some random shows that you've never heard of that somehow were licensed and people kind of forgot about them because they weren't really released by anyone else. So I had a lot of fun downloading them off their IRC channel back in the day. But I guess that brings me back to the problems that were plaguing exiled-destiny, and then as well as the future DVD ripping groups, because there are a few of them. One of them is like AXC or ACX or something like that, and they're significantly worse than exiled-destiny. Exiled-destiny is like the shiniest turd of them all, and the reason I say that is because a lot of times their encodes are kind of crap, and it's usually like it's gonna be like a hit or a miss, and usually it's a miss, especially with older shows. I specifically want to say stuff before the 90s or like the pre-digital age, so like cel-shaded animation. So like let's say you're watching, I don't know, like I watched Armitage 3 recently, and exiled-destiny had that release of it. Their release is not that good. They tend to smooth a lot of things over, and then this is very noticeable with other shows like Irresponsible Captain Tyler, Nadeshko, stuff like that, where the show was animated and it was cel animated, and they remove all the grain because like that requires extra, like extra technical know-how. And I guess like I assume the exiled-destiny, they run their encodes through like a preset, because all their files tend to be about the same size. So regardless of the show and regardless of the quality, you're going to end up with a file that's about 350 megabytes, 340 megabytes, give or take, which can lead to some questionable results because not all shows necessarily require that. And as you get deeper into the encoding iceberg, or go down the encoding iceberg, you're going to realize that one size does not fit all for certain encodes. Some shows might need like certain specific filters that need to be run through it and whatnot, and sometimes a bad encode can ruin a show completely, and that's happened a lot of times with exiled-destiny, more so than any other group that I've seen, because a lot of other release groups like Kuchiki Rukia, who do like old DVDs and stuff, tend to be a bit more careful about that, because like ask any release group or someone who knows a thing or two about encoding, and they will tell you that encoding DVDs is extremely difficult and it's finicky, because to make it actually look good and as it intended, and then to continue to filter it and not ruin the quality, requires someone who has a decent understanding of how encoding works and filtering and whatnot. And exiled-destiny has a tendency to ruin a lot, so that's why shows that are from the 2000s that are more digital tend to look a little bit better, but they aren't necessarily the best. They're usually going to be the one that's there, but they're never going to be the best option. That's just the truth of it. And even if they are the only option for a show, it's almost guaranteed that someone can slap together a remux that's better than that, if they have their hand at encoding or whatever. But sometimes it's not necessarily the case. They're just going to be there, ever present. And that's kind of my problem with these DVD release groups. Even with Kick-Ass Anime, who I tend to like a lot too, simply just because they're like a based early 2000s DVD release group on IRC and shit, like Anime Suki, Mini Tokyo Core, that kind of stuff. And the problem is that during this time, they offered the quality, but they didn't offer the subtitling, and it wasn't really that impressive, I would say. Like, yeah, you had the picture quality, but you were sacrificing the subs, because retail subs usually aren't that good. At least in my opinion, I tend to prefer the fan subs at least. So most times I will tend to watch a show with the fan sub over the exiled-destiny release. After I got over my little adventure through exiled-destiny's backlog, I started to watch more fan subs, and then I found them. But I tend to find these DVD release groups to be kind of annoying, because I kind of know what to expect every single time. That it's going to be a show that looks pretty decent. Their encode's going to look fine. The subtitles are going to be whatever they are. And the thing about subtitles with these shows, never watch the soft sub version of them, because while the soft subs are going to be better because they're scalable and you can also change the font and whatnot, the problem with a lot of these DVDs is that the soft subs are like the laziest fucking OCR thing I've ever seen in my life. These people will just slap them on, and then the thing where you're watching a show, this used to be a huge problem with like horrible subs a few years ago when they were still a thing, but like when multiple characters characters are talking or there's like an announcement in the background or something, the subtitles like stack on top of each other, and then eventually you end up with like 5 lines moving at different rates or something like that all at the bottom of the screen, and it becomes a shit show. And that's a problem with these DVD release groups, is that they usually don't care about that. I've never seen one. Like, I've never seen an exiled-destiny release where they put the second character talking or an announcement or whatever on the top. And they're always just on the bottom. You're lucky if they get like little dashes to signify there's 2 people talking. So that's why I tend to put on the VOB subversion. Like, I was watching Divergence Eve recently. That's not a exiled-destiny release. Let me pull it up just so I can say the name. It's Pat Jantis, who is he's a pretty good DVD encoder, but the problem is that, once again, with soft subs, it was absolutely ruined because there's moments in the show where there's announcements on the ship happening, and there's characters talking at the same time, and it just becomes a blob moving at different rates on the bottom, and you have to like struggle to see which lines are actually moving, and I don't like that. Honestly, the background noise doesn't even matter. They just need the characters talking, but whatever. And also, I hate dubs. I don't think dubs should be included at all. I think at one point I had a script. I think I still have it. Let me look it up. But I had a script specifically for Exiled-Destiny releases to remove the dub, to demux it, the audio track, and then I could delete them later, just because I don't need that useless audio included. But I guess overall, exiled-destiny is a pretty fine release group. They're still continuing to this day. I think they've done like a couple Blu-rays and no one gave a shit about them. They released like Senko-san encoded in like 8-bit or something stupid, and people were like, dude, what the hell are you doing in current year? But their XDCC bot is back up. It's on a couple channels, so you can grab old stuff there, and hopefully it stays up, because for a while there was a scare that they were going to decommission their XDCC bots, but they eventually brought them back, so it's all good in the hood, you know? And also, their name is cool as heck. Like, I don't know if it's a reference to something. I feel like it is, but it's like the most 2002 thing ever, and I love it. So, like, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with these groups. I will begrudgingly download it, and then I will end up watching it, and it's like a baseline. They're not nearly as egregious, and like, just in general, DVD release groups and encoders or whatever, you hardly run into really crappy ones, with the exception of like ACX or whatever the hell they were, but they're not as egregious as these recent web rippers that for like a seasonal show. This is a completely different topic, different rant for a different day. I just want to say, like, for a seasonal show, you got like 10 groups releasing different like H256 encodes or whatever, like these mini encode groups. I thought like Clio died or something, but they're still persisting. Release groups are fine, but they're usually just like there just cause, you know.